20,000 years ago, long before wheat fields and neatly planted orchards, some of our ancestors were already hooked on one thing: green. Out on the steppe or beside a riverbank, their eyes were drawn to patches of leaves, tender shoots, anything that stood out against the browns and grays of dirt and rock. Green meant maybe food, maybe water, and for some people, that hint was irresistible. The ones who leaned into that obsession started to notice patterns. Some kinds of green seemed to do better when you cleared away the weeds around them. Others perked up when they got more sun. Seeds that fell near camp, or that you accidentally dropped there, had a suspicious habit of sprouting right where you wanted them. Slowly, plants stopped being just background scenery and started to look more like needy little creatures with preferences. Treat them like children, and they responded. Protect this patch from trampling feet, and it comes back thicker next season. Break a few branches to let more light in, and the leaves grow bigger. Scatter seeds in a spot with good soil and water, and suddenly wild plants are growing in suspiciously convenient places. The more our ancestors pampered their favorite greens, the more those greens rewarded them, with fatter seeds, sweeter fruits, and food that showed up closer and closer to home. Gardeners flourish. Over time, this didn't just change the plants, it changed us. People who had the right mix of curiosity, patience, and gardener tendencies simply did better. If you could coax more food out of the land around you, you were less likely to go hungry when the hunt failed or the herds moved on. Little by little, families who were obsessed with green things, who watched, weeded, and fussed over plants, had a survival edge. At some point, a few groups could get through a bad season without wandering for days to find food. They could survive on what grew around them. Instead of chasing herds across the landscape, they started returning to the same good spots. The valley with the rich soil, the bend in the river where their favorite greens kept coming back. Home wasn't just a campfire anymore. It was a location on the map. More food close to home didn't just keep people alive. It changed how many children they could raise. Hunter-gatherers often had to wait until one child could walk and keep up before having the next. But once food was growing nearby, you didn't need every older child to be fully independent before another baby arrived. Families could support more little kids at once. Gardeners, in a sense, invented the first kindergartens. Then another shift kicked in: ownership. If you'd spent years coaxing a patch of land into feeding your family, you'd notice if strangers started helping themselves. This land is my land. This tree is my tree. That feeling didn't come from nowhere. It favored people who were good at finding fertile spots, defending them, and calling them home. Being able to spot a promising valley, settle there, and turn it into a permanent address became just another trait that helped some thrive while others moved on. Being there. Roughly 12,000 years ago, humans began to shift from a life of hunting and gathering to one centered on cultivating crops and domesticating animals. This pivotal moment, known as the Agricultural Revolution, set humanity on an entirely new evolutionary path. It wasn't just a farming breakthrough, it was a total transformation. The agricultural revolution sparked sweeping social, cultural, biological, technological, and economic changes. In short, it didn't just change what we ate, it changed who we are. Settling down. This slow, experimental process led communities to settle in one place, often near fertile land or reliable water sources. The best places were riverbanks, where water, fertile soil, and wild plants all came together in one narrow strip of land. Communities could stretch their camps slowly along the banks, following the green fringe. But some wanted to push that green further, so they dug simple canals to pull water away from the river and feed patches of land that would never have bloomed on their own. Once you start redirecting a river, you have a new problem. How do you manage all this water? Canal systems only work if people cooperate. There was a huge advantage for those who could live in large groups, follow shared rules, and keep the water flowing. They needed agreements, early laws, to decide who dug, who maintained, and who got to use the water, and some kind of leadership to make sure the system didn't fall apart. They also had to rein in the violence that had governed much of human behavior, shifting norms so that violence within the group became unacceptable. Over generations, people who could stretch their sense of family into a larger identity, clan, village, city, gained an even bigger edge. This land is our land. This canal is our canal. Belonging to something bigger than the household became a survival strategy in itself. The boom. The first villages and later cities grew from these permanent settlements. A more stable food supply brought rapid population growth. More mouths meant more labor, but also more complexity. As these early settlements grew larger and more organized, entirely new forms of social life began to emerge. Settlements became centers of trade, governance, and culture. But the same lifestyle also brought inequality. Land and surplus food became resources to hoard, leading to property ownership, social hierarchies, and class divisions. Unlike the more flexible, overlapping tasks in hunter-gatherer groups, early agrarian societies increasingly divided labor by special talents and sex. Men typically worked in the fields, while women took domestic roles. Farming changed our bodies. The agricultural revolution didn't just reshape society, it altered our biology. Early farmers shifted from eating a wide variety of wild foods to relying heavily on a few staple crops like wheat, barley, and rice. Getting food became much easier, but there was a catch. Our instinct to eat when we're hungry, which once usually led to a diverse mix of plants and proteins, now often meant filling up on carbohydrates instead. Today we try to outsmart those instincts with diets, hunger-blocking shots, fake carbs, and exercise routines. But rising rates of overweight and obesity show just how powerful that ancient wiring still is. This carbohydrate-heavy diet lacked many of the nutrients found in a hunter-gatherer menu packed with vegetables, fruits, nuts, meat, and fish. As a result, early farmers show more signs of nutritional deficiency in their skeletons, including stunted growth. They were generally shorter and had lower bone density than their foraging ancestors, changes linked to both diet and reduced physical activity. Teeth tell the same story: more cavities and more crooked smiles. This wasn't just about sugar and starch. Recent studies suggest that a shift towards softer, more processed foods led to underdeveloped jaws, which in turn caused crowding and misalignment. Crowded settlements, domesticated animals, and poor sanitation created another problem: disease. Nomadic groups, constantly on the move, rarely experienced large, sustained outbreaks. Settled farmers, by contrast, lived among livestock, accumulated waste, and shared air in tight quarters. Pathogens like measles and pertussis found the perfect home, and they've been with us ever since. And, as opportunistic as we are, whatever land we can control, we tend to fill to its limits. The revolution created far more people, but not necessarily healthier, more resourceful, smarter, or stronger ones. Follow along for more insights into the fascinating story of the history of us. Follow along for more insights into the fascinating story of the history of us.